So these, once I started on these, I thought I want these to be mostly about color, so I'm going to keep the composition simple. And that horizontal composition seemed to make sense. And as I started working on them, they seemed less like landscape-ish or waterscape and more like a cross-section of something. Maybe again being somewhat subconsciously inspired by those textbooks. So I began to just work again a little bit smaller and then kind of build these up. And I'm taking advantage, I think, in these paintings of a lot of the things I've learned from other series of things. The blip paintings were a lot of scraping and sanding to get back to some layers underneath. And I think that's a lot of what these are about. The color schemes I start with aren't really, cut in stone. I start with an idea, either inspired again by something in nature or inspired by a photo in a textbook or whatever, and try to stick within a certain palette. But it always goes in another direction, which I don't mind. And they're done in layers so that they're built up and then sanded and scraped until some of the other paint comes through. So they're a little hard to predict, but that's what I like about the process. I think, of course, I'm not the first stripe painter in the world. There have been plenty of other stripe painters, but most of them, at least the earlier stripe painters, had a very clean line and a very solid color. And I think the texture and the overlap in these really is what interests me. So I stretch the canvas on a hard board first and work on the painting so I can scrape it and sand it, and if it comes out to be one that I want to save, I put it on a stretcher frame and it's finished. I had been in a few exhibits at the Rawls Museum. One was a juried show maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and one was with a group of artists I show with down then called Constructs. And they're a group of artists from Washington, D.C. and from Richmond, and I'm the only one from Colonial Beach, that we do a kind of a traveling show. And we set it up at different universities and museums and things. It's not a package show because we can change what we put in the show each time it shows. So one of the stops it made was at the Rawls Museum. And the painting I had in the juried show and in the Constructs were some of the earlier stripe paintings, the strata paintings. And Leanne Chambers, who's the director of the museum down there, really liked the work. So we got to talking after a while, and she said, well, we have a opening for an exhibit. This was maybe 1.5 years ago, she mentioned it, and coming up in 2010, and would you be interested in having a solo show? And I said, sure. Well, the gallery space there is a pretty good size space. There's a hallway and an office, but the actual large space to show in is 60 feet by 30 feet. So it's a good size space. And I got to thinking, I said, well, that many stripes. And this museum is kind of in a rural area. It's affiliated with the Virginia Museum, kind of on the edge of that whole metropolis down there. That's Norfolk and that area, Virginia Beach. So I said, well, since it's such a big space, why not make it more of a show where I show some of the paintings that led up to the stripes. And the more we talked, I said, well, I've got paintings that led up to those paintings. And well, why don't we just make it a retrospective? And she liked that idea. And again, the space was kind of limited, so that's why I left out the photographs and a lot of the other directions. Looking at a show like this, even though I've seen these paintings over and over in different contexts, to see them in one space, set up the way they are, I even see them differently than I had before. As I get older, I want to focus more on what's really important to me. And this Strata series that started in 2000, about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I don't really see an end to yet. It changes if we Yeah, if we were able to look at the early stratas, recent ones, the color changes, the texture changes, the width of the stripes change, and you would think after a while that would get to be kind of limiting, and I'd have to move on to something else. But it keeps kind of surprising me.